Thank you very much for inviting me. What I would like to present to you today is what I call the rise of ethical perspectives. Just before I start, actually, am I? You hear me? Everything's okay? Thumbs up.
We
Yeah, good, good. The what I call the rise of ethical perspectives, um, building trust in robotics and AI, and I will very soon, in a few slides, explain what I mean by each of these things. So why am I talking about the rise of ethical perspectives, for example, and why am I talking about building trust, and why am I talking about robotics and AI? However, before that, let me just give a very short personal biography. Normally, I would not invest too much time in my personal bio. You know, if I'm at a conference, I'm not going to tell exactly who I am. But I'm doing this today because I think it's quite interesting that you invited me. And I've, of course, also checked the previous presentations at TAFs. And in a way, we already talked a little bit about this before the talk started with Jacob and with Rezul, that I'm not a very typical presenter here. Like I'm coming from another perspective. So I'm kind of trying to explain here. Yeah, so I have a background in the humanities and in the social sciences, with which I'm trying to explain I'm a bit of an outsider. Yeah, so I'm not so much into quantitative research. Neither am I in engineering. However, as you can see already, I have always specialized from quite early on. So I think I started with that around 10 years ago with my bachelor thesis in history. I started to specialize in technology. For example, in my bachelor in history was about the effect of automation in the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Yeah, so what was the effect of automation in this port, and what effect did it have on the workers? And there were a lot of protests, for example, and I was figuring out what were the arguments in this discussion. I also have worked. I have also studied philosophy, where I did a lot of ethics. Already from quite early on, focused on the ethics of robotics and AI. And I did science and technology studies, which is more in the social sciences. It's like a critical a way of looking at technology in a critical way. Let's say, like, what is the influence of society on technology? How, like the way we design technologies, for example, but also the other way around. How does technology influence society? But how do these two affect one another? And of course, you choose then more specific technologies. But let's talk about that later. Then with that, I went to the TU Wien, and I did my PhD is basically finished. So 4 years ago, I did that. I started that. I went to the TU Wien to work in the Trust Robot Doctoral College, and that's specifically interesting, I would say, in the context of this talk, namely because I would say I have quite a lot of experience because of this PhD of being in environments that are not necessarily my humanities or social science environment. Yeah, so I've been working a lot with engineers and other disciplines that you will find at the TU. Currently, I'm still at the TU, but I started a new job a month ago at the Center for Social Innovation, also in Vienna, which is very much is working in many European projects where they work on ethics implementation, on responsible innovation. And I think that's also quite interesting if in relation to the mission of TAFs that we just saw. Like, you are interested in transfer of knowledge between different fields to learn from each other. That is exactly my goal. Also, kind of moving out of academia a little bit. I'm still in research, but a bit closer to the implementation of all of these great but great ideas, but difficult to implement. And that's also mainly the topic of the talk today. Yeah, so here's the agenda. My main goal here is not to really dive deep into one ethical problem or something, but much more to provide a background to the rise of ethical perspectives in AI and robotics. Yeah. So in the introduction, in the actual introduction to my talk, I'm going to define each of these elements. I'm going to define what I mean by robotics and AI, what I mean by trust, and why is trust even relevant. Yeah, I haven't mentioned that at all yet, I think, and how it is related to ethics. But very quickly, I will just mention what I mean by these, and then in the three main points, it's really kind of a bit of a storyline where I first explain how ethics is useful in a context of emerging technologies like robotics and AI. So I explicitly define robotics and AI as such. Then two, how we want to build trust with the help of ethics and ethical approaches. And then three is kind of the difficult point, like the actual implementation. I don't really think there is already a great solution for this even. And then some closing remarks about the future of ethics in tech development. So just to summarize once more, I want to make sense a bit. I want to make sense of this story. I hope you all agree with me that, that ethics has become this big thing. I'll talk a bit more about that later. And I want to make a bit of sense of that for you. I hope you will kind of agree with my points there. Anyway, in terms of introduction, so we're talking about basically about three different topics that are connected into one storyline, if you will. Namely, the first topic, robotics and AI. The second one, trust. Yeah, you probably have forgotten it already, but the doctoral college that I was part of was called Trust Robot, so it was specifically focused on trust. And then ethics. What is the role of ethics in all of that? Now, before I move to the next slide, so these three things I will explain in more detail in the next slides. One last thing I want to say is that my dissertation had a narrative approach to these things. The only thing I mean by that is that this is a typical social science thing where you kind of look from a bit of a distance at what robotics and AI is, what the consensus is on trust, and how ethics is used. So that means you are not necessarily trying to define things, but you rather look at how others define it. In my case, for example, I have analyzed how the European Union defines trust and how the European Union understands ethics. So I'm not so much coming myself with the definition. I'm rather looking with some kind of critical distance at these things. This is quite important, because this sometimes also means that you analyze things that you are not necessarily agreeing with. And this also counts for today. I will sometimes explain things, how the EU has done things, for example, doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with that, but I'm trying to analyze this in a kind of a neutral, as neutral as possible way. Okay, so first of all, robotics and AI. What do I mean by that? I am first of all very much focusing on robotics and AI as emerging technologies. Yeah. And this is exactly also the reason why I am taking them together. And I think it is quite important, especially here today. Probably some of you will absolutely not agree, actually. Some of you will be like, why are you, I don't know, let's say you're in machine learning and a machine learning practitioner, and you're like, I have nothing to do with robotics. However, from the perspective of these two as emerging technologies, I hope you agree that they are very often seen together, and there are kind of good reasons for that, to which I will come later. But for now, it's important to understand that I focus on them as emerging technologies, as like upcoming technologies. Secondly, it is crucial that I have quite a strong focus on the public image of these technology. So this means a strong emphasis on the autonomy. Some of you who might be working in robotics or AI might very much recognize that people, let's say you're on a random birthday party, or you're in a random bar, the average Joe will focus on the autonomy and the danger of this autonomy, or the excitement of the autonomy of robotics and AI applications. And that, especially in terms of robotics, but also with AI, often is also related to anthropomorphization. So we like to project human features on these machines or applications. And then the last thing is I am focused quite strongly on expectations, social and governmental expectations. Things that are not there yet but are expected, and people are trying to prepare for that. Then trust. In my research, I have focused, this is already partly related to what I was just saying. I have focused on social impact. So I was just saying already, like I look at the public image and expectations of people. So it kind of makes sense that I am then also looking at trust in relation to the social impact. And this is very different from many colleagues of mine. For example, I had colleagues who worked on trust between a robot and a human, for example, and how to change the features of a robot so that people are more trustworthy to it in a direct interaction. I have more this overarching concept of trust. It's called social trust. Often social trust is called the chicken soup of social life, in the sense that it's a bit ungraspable, like chicken soup. When you're sick and you I don't know, somebody makes you chicken soup and you feel better, it's great, but why is a bit unclear. And sometimes it's also called the dark matter of our economy and our society. Simply because if social trust in a society is very low, it's often very closely related to a lack of economic growth, a non-functioning society. You need a certain level of trust in the society. This kind of trust is very difficult to quantify, and this is what the image is related to. There is, by my knowledge, one kind of funny experiment how they quantify social trust, that is like leaving wallets with a certain amount of money all over the world, and then testing in how many, with a name in it. So name, the name of the person who owns the wallet, and the more amount of wallets that are brought back in a certain city, the higher the social trust. I don't know, you can question the method, but this is one of the few ways of kind of quantifying social trust, and this experiment has been done also in quite some cities. Another way to quantify it is sometimes simply by looking at public trust. And here we are already much closer to robotics and AI, because there are many now, especially nowadays, you see many surveys that ask people about the trust or the distrust they have towards robotics and AI, or towards the future with robotics and AI. Like, how confident are you about the future? Very confident, or not confident at all, or somewhere in the middle. So that public trust in something is already a bit easier to measure, and can also in many ways be related to the concept of social trust. Anyway, regardless from this difficulty of quantifying this, there is a clear fear among policymakers and generally people, opinion makers, etc., that robotics and AI, so the current the technologies that are currently driving further automation might be bad for social trust, because certain people are going to lose from this, certain people are not being able to adjust to these new technologies and the way this affects their work, etc., etc. So in that regard, ethical thinking is often presented as a solution. It's just not me who's saying that, but you really see this quite clearly. And I will talk a bit more about that later. And it also kind of makes sense in many ways that they think that ethics can do something there. So let me then immediately define ethics. The last kind of major part, element of this presentation. Ethics in itself is simply a very old subfield of philosophy. Yeah, so Aristotle wrote already the Nicomachean Ethics. I don't really have time. I don't really think it makes sense now to talk about Aristotle, but just to, Aristotle was kind of defining a good way to live, an ethical way to live, a long time ago. What's more interesting for today, I think that in philosophy of technology, ethics, so the philosophy that thinks about the effects of technology, ethics has been around for quite a long time. Yeah, so it's really not that with the current rise of robotics and AI, ethics became a thing. No, ethics has been there for years, really, like for decades. And it has always been a useful framework for elaborating on moral issues connected to technologies. Yeah, so technologies have a certain effect in our society, and in certain ways they also have moral effects, or we think about technologies having certain political and moral implications, and then ethical frameworks simply provide you a way to not formalize these problems, but think about these problems in a bit more structured way. However, recent years, and now we're coming closer even to today's topic, there is clearly a sharp rise in activities in terms of ethics with regards to autonomous technologies. We'll get back to that later why, but in general, it's also useful in interdisciplinary collaborations. I just wanted to emphasize this because philosophy itself has also become much more interdisciplinary. In the past, philosophers were more in an ivory tower and thinking all day and writing that down, but nowadays philosophers will try to work with other disciplines, and ethics is very useful for that. Then what I also finally wanted to mention, I also gave a picture of the trolley problem there, that in AI research, which is also way older than just the last few years, like it really goes back to people like Alan Turing, etc. Ethics has also been around. Like you can find papers from the 90s or from the 80s where people are trying to make a concept in AI research about how to develop an ethical AI. There's nothing, I mean, it has become way bigger nowadays, but it's not new. So the formalization of ethical rules into AI systems is a relatively old theme, and what is often used there is logic. Logic is also a subfield of philosophy. Okay, so now to the actual, we were already there, but let's really dive into the three main topics now. But before that, I want to just make three underlying assumptions. I kind of made them already, but I just want to make them clear once again. First of all is what I call the buzzword assumption, that ethics is currently kind of a buzzword that is often mentioned in order to address current fears about robotics and AI. It's really the go-to solution for many fears that we have about robotics and AI. Second, about that one, I have actually not talked that much. That the definition of ethics has become, with partly as a result of this buzzword effect, it has become to mean many different things. So, and because of that, it kind of also has sometimes, yeah, the meaning has become so unclear that nobody really knows what it actually does. And third, I really would like to problematize here today, or to find this, to discuss together maybe the implementation. Yeah, so talking about ethics is big at the moment. Implementing should be bigger, in my opinion, but it's also much more difficult. Ethics and technology, they don't match that well, for clear reasons that I will talk about later. Good. So, like the main topic one, like really like an important part of the story. I really want you to understand here. So back to the goal. The goal is to provide you a bit of a background of this, the rise of ethics, right? I really think it is very important to understand that robotics and AI should be understood as emerging technologies. Yeah? If you start to define robotics and AI as an emerging technology, then ethics comes way quicker into the picture. Yeah. So what are emerging technologies? There are many definitions, but among other things, they are characterized by expectations of very quick development, either expectations of that or quick development, like we see, for example, at the moment with ChatGPT is a clear example of how AI is at the moment an emerging technology, and everybody's talking about it, and everybody expects it to develop even faster, because also we have clear examples of that. Like ChatGPT was, I mean, there was of course GPT-3 last year, but ChatGPT itself became, of course, big around this year. Strong public coverage and buzzwords around it. I don't think I need to explain that much. I think you understand this already. The third point, I think, is very quite crucial. There is often with emerging technologies, whichever emerging technology you want to talk about, there is simultaneously a strong fear, like what is it going to do and how is it going to change our society or ourselves, or what problems can it create, and excitement. Yeah, because in the end we also all want to know what's going on and why these technologies are developing so fast, and what they can do and how they can improve our lives and our society. Yeah? So this is interesting. At the same time, this is often even in the same people. Yeah? People are afraid of it, but also excited about it. And the fourth point, emerging technologies are often characterized by speculative expectations and visions. Yeah, so many people do not like to speculate that much, or I mean, it's not considered. If you make a very speculative argument about the future, I don't know, if you argue very well, maybe people will believe you, but otherwise people are often like, okay, come with proof. What's your point? Interestingly, with emerging technologies, it's often way more normal and allowed, actually, it's completely accepted to speculate about the future. So that's, I think, from a social scientist perspective, that's very interesting. Some people even have put this in terms of religion, that technology is almost like a replacement of religion, where we speculate about a great future ahead, or a dangerous future ahead. Then the second main bullet point is about the governance of emerging technologies. Yeah? This has really become a big topic in the last decades, but especially in the last decade. because we have seen many problems. For example, with social media, the effect of social media. Social media came up very quickly, and governments were not able to deal with the effects of it. A famous example that I always give is how the election of Trump is sometimes attributed to Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and people are like, well, we should have forbidden this kind of use of social media. Whatever you may think about that, but it's, I think, a good example. So the governance of emerging technology is an important topic, not only because what I just said, but also simply because governments want to be ahead in this specific technology. Yeah, so they the topic of emerging technology is a way to make investments in a leading development trend. So if you say we're going to invest in AI as an emerging technology, and we're going to put money in that, and that, it's simply a useful way of allocating your money, your investments somewhere as a government, and also getting investments from private investors, of course. Of course, also in government, there is a lot of expectations about potential societal impact. Yeah, so governments have this task kind of to take care of their citizens, so they have to think about societal impact of emerging technologies, and especially in Europe, there is often a strong focus on the potential risk. Yeah, I will talk a bit more about that later. Now, in terms of ethics, and I hope this is kind of a bit of a surprise, but or maybe all of you know a lot about ethics already, but there is actually quite a long history in governments with concerning thinking about ethics and values in relation to emerging technologies. Also, I think, yeah, I told this already, but this is a central topic, really. The think about values is a central topic in fields like philosophy of technology and science and technology studies. And there are many different frameworks that you will find experts in. For instance, responsible research and innovation, value-sensitive design, socially responsible design, participatory design, or people who talk about the dark side of innovation. This is really quite a big field of expertise that is quite respected at the moment. In a way, the work that I am doing is exactly in this field. Like you try to think about innovation, but you also try to think about the values that you want to embody as a society. Then to come back a bit to, so now I talked mainly just about emerging technologies. I'm of course mentioned robotics and AI, but just to define robotics and AI a bit better as an emerging technology, I would like to draw your attention to the AI-powered robot as a social cultural icon. That's simply a difficult way of saying that robots or automata, in history they were called automata, have a long history as fascinating and sometimes uncanny living machines. Think any sci-fi movie, but also think way back to older representations of living machines in literature or generally in the public image. So there are actually many examples of automata and robots from historical sources. Even the word robot itself comes from science fiction. Rossum's Universal Robot, a Czech play written in 1921, or that came out in 1921. And of course, in art and popular media, robots and AI-powered robots have very strong anthropomorphization. Yeah? Many sci-fi movies have an anthropomorphized robot. Yeah, so it should not be that much of a surprise that there is a strong idea in our society of a mystified, futurist, either utopian or dystopian expectation towards AI-powered robots. And I am emphasizing this that much. Maybe this all makes total sense now, but I have noticed many times when I was talking to my engineering friends that they had a strong, they expressed some kind of strong discontent about this. But it's not that surprising because the history of uh, like living machines is simply a very long history. There's a strong element in our culture. And these things are often difficult. Like old stories or old ways of thinking are simply exciting for people. And also, you have to admit it's quite exciting to have anthropomorphized machines. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, where this fiction mixes with reality. And that, I think, that is really one of my main points today, because I think, I would argue that this is really one of the main reasons that ethics became so big. This fear, um, especially this fear of anthropomorphized features. So the imitation, the possibility of imitating a human, either virtual in terms of artificial intelligence or even in more physical spaces like within robotics. By the way, I think robotics will still take quite some time before this is properly realized, but that's a topic for another time. Yeah. So in I was just saying, like, where the two start to mix, where fiction and stories and cultural, social cultural icons, as I called it, start to mix is exactly in this public sphere. Yeah? So for example, I put here a picture of Andrew Yang, the Democrat, one of the candidates who ran against Joe Biden, but then Joe Biden won. A strong part of his message was that automation is going to change society completely, so you should vote for him and he will do something about it. Killer robots are, of course, also a very good example that gets people, interested. And in Europe, there was even a talk about, should we grant robots some kind of personhood? So what I'm trying to say here is, in recent years, there has been a strong increase over the role of AI and robotics in discussion. Sorry, a strong increase in discussions over the role of AI and robotics in our society. And also, coming like directly related to that, I would say, a rise in and governmental uh, governmental and corporate interest in solutions to these fears. Like, what can we do about this? And in that sense, I would like to focus on the EU, because I have worked a lot on that. I worked a lot on the EU policy, was a big part of my PhD work. Namely, that ethics plays is a very important notion in the EU robotics and AI strategy. So if we go to this case of the European Union, I'm going to paint, I'm going to give you a quick overview how this idea of ethics and trust in relation arose. So in the EU in 2018, they created a high-level expert group with a strong focus on the need for building trust. I was actually just seeing a quote. Let me read it to you once from Margrethe Vestager, the executive vice president for digital transformation in Europe, I think it is. And she says about artificial intelligence, trust is a must, not a nice to have. So the European Union really put this as a bit of as a problem that they were going to solve, or that was kind of their main is still their main policy idea, to create trust. And clearly behind that is the idea that trust will be a big issue. Yeah. So strong focus on the need for building trust. And ethics, I think I've explained this already now, but ethics also in this kind of policy was presented as a very important framework to achieve the goals of building trust. So in 2018, the European Commission created a coordinated plan, with an EU-wide strategy, and I am putting there an exclamation mark because in the EU is never 100% clear if something should actually be governed by the EU. So if there's an EU-wide strategy, then countries have kind of decided that they want to do this together. And then in 2019, the Commission under von der Leyen paid explicit attention to the impact of AI and robotics. And that is a bit special because in an agenda, when they create this agenda, they are not going to mention every little issue. They really try to pick the main points they want to do something about. Yeah? So that resulted since 2021. Like in 2021, the AI Act came out, and the AI Act is supposed to be really something a bit like the GDPR is for data, the AI Act is for AI. But it's not, it just came out, it's not implemented yet. And this AI Act is supposed to be a European approach and is an attempt at proper regulation focused on risk assessment. And here you see how they want to assess this risk. They want to have some kind of system. It might be even a bit like how accountants judge your, if you have a company and you have an accountant, they judge if you did everything okay with you financially, and they say, okay, this is accepted, tick the boxes, and your company is okay. In a way, we might probably have something like accountants for risk. Yeah, so if you have an application, they will judge, is it unacceptable risk? Then it will be prohibited. Is the risk high? Then it will be strongly regulated. Is it limited risk? Then you just have to be relatively transparent. Or is the risk low/minimal? Then you have no obligations. So this is really an attempt at proper regulation focused on risk assessment. And with that, as always, the EU is trying to also create a bit of a global standard. Some people say that the EU's global influence mainly comes from its high level of standardization. So like, whereas other continents like the US have a strong military power, some people say the power of the EU is exactly its standardization. Let's not discuss this today, but this is an important, this is often how the EU is described. So in conclusion, what I really want to make clear here is that in the old situation, the governance of robotics and AI was not that there was nothing that governments never thought about robotics and AI, but it was mainly an economic and commercial issue, like something to invest in, maybe some industrial policy, etc., etc. The new situation is really that the impact of robotics and AI represents a clear risk for policymakers, especially in the EU. Ethical approaches are then seen as a solution to these new policy problems. So there is a lot of attention for issues like what could be a risk, for instance, is artificial agency, so that machines have a certain agency. Beforehand, we mostly thought that humans have agency, like a possibility to act, or maybe companies, but not so much machines, or at least it was perfectly regulated. If like robots in the past, where if they had some kind of possibility to act, they would be in a fence, in a very clear, like a fence with buttons that if you enter the fence, the robot, you push the red button and the robot will not move. That is also changing, of course. Robots are entering our daily lives, is the idea. So then you have completely new kinds of risk, and a society and its legal system has to deal with this risk. Um, Finally, a point that I also would like to make a little bit, I'm repeating myself here a little bit, but once more, that in the AI race, yeah, so the race for AI dominance, the EU is trying to have this narrative of being maybe not the fastest in terms of the development, but being human-centered and trustworthy, and then on the long term having actually better and more profound development. That's their story. Okay, so then I'm already at the last part of my presentation. I think I'll be talking maybe 5-10 minutes more. Namely, what I really see as the underlying challenge here is okay, we have seen that they have tried to implement it in terms of risk, etc., and this is then partly based on ethical risk, etc. But I think if we really want to have this ideal that the EU has, but also many other people kind of allude to, the idea that we can have ethical AI and ethical robotics, I really think that we need much more focus on the interdisciplinary implementation of ethical perspectives. And that's really, in my opinion, the hard and difficult work. I have experienced this myself very much. I've worked in different projects. I worked, for example, in a project with collaborative robots, where I really worked in a team to implement these in a makerspace in this case. And you just have, first of all, ethicists and engineers and other kinds of disciplines. They just think very differently. Different epistemologies, different methodologies. This really, if you want to make this work, we need to invest in that. We need to work together. This is going to take time as well. We need to really invest time in that. And also, I want to make kind of a self-critical point towards my own field, especially. So social sciences and humanities. We really need to learn, I think, to align with the developments in AI and robotics. Yeah, so it is quite easy to say robotics should be forbidden or AI should be forbidden because everybody's going to be jobless. But it's very important to know the details, in my opinion. And this simply also takes a lot of time. I think this doctoral college that I was part of was a great chance for me to work together, for example, with roboticists. So it's a good direction, but I think much more work can be done in this direction. Then a second point, I don't really know what to do with that, but I think, we can solve this as well. It's namely that ethics is always kind of by definition something critical. You try to make a you try to criticize something. That's what ethics is for. You're using an ethical framework to criticize something that is happening, and you want to say it should be done differently. And it's of course important to maintain this, because otherwise why would we call it ethics? But I think it's still a big challenge to provide criticism that is also constructive, to really just be able to work together with other fields that are more applied. And then the last point of this slide is that I think we should also invest in and improve new kinds of anticipatory expertise in ethics. So we should be able to think big about the future, but in a credible way. So I think 21st century technology will be very much about anticipatory policy making and the larger political economy of technologies. So the big question is, how can we create and develop balanced foresight about the future based on rigorous interdisciplinary speculative thinking? I think we really haven't. This is an unsolved challenge, basically. Okay. Just kind of a first proposal on how to do this, on how to implement ethics. We can gladly discuss this. is, first of all, of course, the implementation of ethical impact assessment frameworks, so already existing, like guidelines, certifications, and we can still improve here, but it's also in some ways already existing. We should continue thinking about how to design ethical autonomous agents. So how we can have artificial agents that have certain values built into them. This is mainly in the field of logic, as I mentioned before. And you see this also now at the TU, for example. They will. There was recently a position for an assistant professorship in formalizing ethics in AI. So this is happening already. Of course, also it's very much about integrating ethics in developer communities. So things like value-sensitive design, but also how can developer communities or engineering communities participate in policy advice. And the last one, but maybe also the most problematic one, how can we think about or debate large-scale consequences of AI and robotics? So, and how can we improve that? So also not just be critical, but also in a positive way. Maybe we can talk about democratizing AI, but what does that mean yet? How do we make sure that it doesn't just mean something that it doesn't become meaningless? And a consequence of this, which is problematic for many people, is that it explicitly makes technology into something political. Okay, so closing remarks, a few minutes left. It's currently, I think, difficult to clearly define what is ethical robotics and AI. Regardless of the implementable laws, rules, guidelines, etc., we need a continuous discourse on this. And I also think we actually need to watch out that transformative technologies, so the transformative potential of AI and robotics, needs to be kept in mind. Like it's not necessary that we want to keep everything the same, as it was before. In some ways, that's a danger with ethics. We need to still recognize that maybe there is a better future. And that robotic and AI technology can help us transform towards this better future. And I think I made a mistake there. Sorry, the last point is the same as on the last slide. So, thank you very much for your attention. Questions and comments are very welcome. And if you I don't know, maybe if you need an expert on AI ethics or robot ethics, or you're just interested in my work, you can email me or check one of my social channels. Thank you.